I want to get into this whole New York Knicks situation and the Brooklyn Nets. This is the hottest time of year because you have the NBA All-Star Game a couple of weeks away, and then you have the trade deadline, which seems to be a spin-off of just craziness. And I don't know what's going on with the New York teams right now. It's like spin the wheel, make the deal, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, whatever game show you want. With the New York Knicks, Julius Randle's had just a completely terrible season. He's just been horrible. He's averaging 18 points. He's 42% field goal percentage. He can't hit his foul shots right now. His rebounding has gotten worse this year. He's still a decent passer, but he's been ball hogging, shooting up bricks, air balls. He's been horrible. The best thing about the Knicks this year is the growth of R.J. Barrett. You've seen that R.J. Barrett could take over games, and you could see that R.J. Barrett could be the number one target for this New York Knicks team. But right now, Julius Randle's stock has gone down. He did take the least amount of money in the offseason with the great year last year, comeback player of the year. He was an all-star last year, averaging almost 24 points a game, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists. He was one of the best players in the league last year. But he also played with no fans. There was nobody in the audience until the end of the season. You saw what he was when the fans started to come in. He didn't play as well. Then the playoffs, he completely had a no-show against the Atlanta Hawks. And Atlanta Hawks went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. It could have been the Knicks going to the Eastern Conference Finals if they beat the Hawks. But to me, you really get to know who Julius Randle is. And then this year, with the whole thumbs down and talking trash to the fans and talking trash about the fans, saying he doesn't give a crap, when last year they were screaming MVP for him and he loved it, and he says this is all about the fans of New York. I wouldn't be the player I am right now, and I wouldn't want to be here if it wasn't for the fans. And then he takes shots at the fans the year after. So I don't know where Julius Randle is, but there are rumors coming out right now. They've reached out to the Lakers. The Lakers are very much interested in Julius Randle, the LeBron Lakers, because he's probably
going back after all that.
Yes. So Julius Randle has been definitely somebody that the Lakers are interested in. Also, the Sacramento Kings. There are stories coming out that the Knicks reached out to the Sacramento Kings. They have their point guard of the future now, and De'Aaron Fox, he's expendable. He had a big contract. He's getting paid a lot of money, and the Knicks are looking for a point guard. Now, what's good about De'Aaron Fox is he's one of the faster guys in the NBA. He can open up the court and be the player the Knicks need him to be, but he's not a great shooter, and that's a big problem, especially in a Thibodeau offense. But to me, would I want De'Aaron Fox or would I want Julius Randle? I'm going to want De'Aaron Fox. I think he's the point guard that the Knicks have been craving, what they need. And to me, that would be an awesome flip-flop of players, because Sacramento could get a player that is a little bit cheaper. The Knicks can get a little bit more of an expensive player. They'll have to throw another player or two in there. But I think this would be a great trade.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, I do too, because I think the other thing too is a lot of the Sacramento reporters have mentioned that Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox are not getting along either. So maybe that could keep him incentive. Now, Buddy Hield's been in a lot of trade rumors too. Maybe that could be an incentive to keep him and trade De'Aaron Fox and still get a good player, not great, but good player in Julius Randle back. And Julius Randle's not going to touch the ball massive amounts because of Hield and because of Tyrese Halliburton, their young point guard too. So that kind of situation could present itself well for Julius Randle. Sacramento, not a big market, so you're not going to have to worry about those fans berating you like the Knicks fans do. And it's not a big pressure city because, well, the Kings, yeah, they have a playoff drought that's forever, but there's going to be pressure from the local media, but it's not like the Knicks or the Lakers or the Miami Heat or anything like that where you're going to have all that kind of pressure. Now with the Nets with their big three as well, that might not be a big three, but still, I think it's a good swap when you look at the contracts too, because De'Aaron Fox is 5 years, 163, which is pretty big, but it's for a younger point guard that has some upside still. It still might be a good long-term investment to look at. Now, it's backloaded, so the Knicks, if they were to do that kind of thing, it'd be 32, 34, 37 later on, but maybe at that point, he becomes a peak point guard at that point. Shooting is something that can be developed. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's something that still is something that can be developed later in his career. Look at LeBron. LeBron wasn't a great shooter at the beginning of his career, too. He developed his shot. Now, I'm not saying De'Aaron Fox is going to be that good, but still, it's something that can be developed. The Knicks haven't had a point guard like this since the 90s, so they need something like that to get a spark and get something going with these young players.
Absolutely, and there's just so much stories coming out of the New York Knicks. If I were the Knicks right now, even if they make the playoffs, even if they squeak into the playoffs, they're not going to win anything this year. Right. And even if they bring in De'Aaron Fox and they trade Julius Randle, they're still not ready to win. So if you're a Knicks fan, do you want them to win or do you want them to lose? If you're a real Knicks fan, you would say you would want them to lose. I know nobody's going to absolutely bomb games, but right now with the draft the way it is this year, they still have their pick. Do they have Dallas's pick this year?
No, I think Dallas's pick
Next
was
year.
next year, yeah.
Right, so they still have their pick. It could be a lottery pick, and you want to get into the lottery in this year's draft because I think there's a lot of depth in this year's draft. And I think if the Knicks can get into the top 7 or a top 6 of picks, they can get another good player, and they can build around the R.J. Barretts, the Obi Toppins, the Quigleys, the Grimes, and then you have De'Aaron Fox and R.J. Barrett. And if you decide to bring back Cam Reddish next year, you have players that you can build around, and you'll have trade pieces if you want to go after a Williamson or somebody like that. So I understand why a lot of Knicks fans still like Julius Randle, but Julius Randle is just not fit to play in New York. I just don't see him to be a New York Knick in the future. I think he took a good contract because he thought that he was going to have another good season and the Knicks were going to bring in another superstar to play with him and R.J. Barrett, but he is not even a Robin. He's like a Spider-Man or something like that. I mean, a Wolverine.
He's not that good. He's not Spider-Man.
Whatever. You know, a
Catwoman,
all right? The Penguin or whatever, the Riddler. He's probably more like the Riddler because he's got jokes.
That's a good one.
All in all, right now, when you look at the big picture, Julius Randle is not fit to be there for the future for the New York Knicks. So I think they need to decide what they're going to do with him and move on from him.
I think as well, too, the way team basketball worked with Thibodeau's system, it definitely is evident now that him wasting shots the way he does is not going to work for players like this either. And De'Aaron Fox isn't like that. De'Aaron Fox, he's not a great three-point shooter.
He's Russell Westbrook.
But he's still not somebody that, when they miss their shots, they still keep shooting anyway and derail teams from having good team offenses, too. Not that the Kings are great, but their problems are more on defense.
Yeah, and De'Aaron Fox is a guy that gets to the hole. Decent foul shooter. He's not the best foul shooter, but he's a 76, 77% foul shooter right now in the NBA, and he can develop a shot. He doesn't need to be a three-point shooter. The Knicks have a couple of really good shooters on the team, and Grimes is a future great shooter for the New York Knicks. Quigley is a great shooter for the New York Knicks. Even Obi Toppin's become a decent big man that could shoot threes. And Obi Toppin, you want to see more Obi Toppin play. And since Julius Randle's been a part of this team, we haven't seen enough of Obi's development. So they need to move on. That's why they drafted Obi Toppin. They could have had Halliburton, but they wanted Obi Toppin. So they need to get him on the court. They need to play him as much as they possibly can to figure out what he is. As far as the Brooklyn Nets are concerned, I don't know what's going on with James Harden. I understand Kyrie Irving came back. You would think that Kyrie and James wanted to play together. That's why they brought 3 of these guys together. You see the body language on the court. It doesn't look like Kyrie wants to play with him, and it doesn't look like James wants to play with him. And now that Kevin Durant is hurt, he's not the middleman that can control what's going on and off the court. So now you see what's going on, and the team isn't playing well right now.
Ever since 6th seed now.
Yeah, ever since Kevin Durant has gotten hurt, they're just not playing at the top of their game. So I think the Nets are going to have to decide what they're doing with James, because if James is saying that he's going to leave at the end of the season, you need to get back something for him, especially giving up all those picks. And by the way, this could absolutely ruin Marks. This could absolutely ruin him. We've seen this already. Billy King traded away draft stock and great young players for Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and the Jet, and it didn't work out over there. Now you bring in James Harden 2 years later. He wants out, and you gave up all those picks and all those players. It's absolutely horrible. And Karis LeVert has become a really good player. Jared Allen's become a great player over there. And then the
Spencer
picks, Dinwiddie, the picks. This is absolutely terrible for the Brooklyn Nets, and this could send Marks all the way back to the San Antonio Spurs, because I knew this was going to hurt them doing this. James Harden has not worked out for them, and it seems like he wants out, and he already said he's on his way out of here. So maybe Ben Simmons, even though it's not fair, at least you're getting something back for him. Ben Simmons still a good player. He's not a superstar player, but he's still a star, a guy that can give you rebounds, which they crave, they need. He's one of the best defensive players in the league. That's what they need. So if it comes down to it, trade him to the 76ers. That's where he wants to go, and get Ben Simmons.
Yeah, you might see a three-way swap, too, with trying to match the money as well, too, because the Sixers have a lot of money problems, too, so they're probably going to have to even try to move Tobias Harris or something like that, too, whose contract looks bad the way he's playing this year as well. So it's going to be a lot of tricky trade dilemmas for the Nets if they're going to try to do this, because James Harden is a great player, but there's not a lot of teams like actively shopping their stars as much as we thought. The Wizards are back on the market with Bradley Beal, trying to trade him, but the Damian Lillard, the CJ McCollums that we thought would be traded.
Are they trading Bradley Beal?
Now the rumors are back on that they're trying to again, so maybe that's an option, but again, still.
Boston Celtics.
Even though
Jaylen Brown. I'm telling you.
But he's another one that's on the market, too, which is interesting,
I love
too.
Jaylen Brown. I hated Jaylen Brown. Remember how many times
I didn't like him either out of the draft either.
But now I really love his game. It's really transformed.
Right.
It really
Maybe that's
has.
the kind of player that would be an ideal swap for both teams, because the Celtics have lacked offense. I'm not sure if James Harden's going to want to stay there, but the Celtics lack offense, and the Nets really still lack defense.
Jaylen Brown for James, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and Jaylen Brown is still young, too. Actually,
and he's a great defensive
player.
player.
That should actually probably could be a swap that could be looked at. Obviously, the Celtics will have to throw in a little more than that, but
James doesn't want to go there. He wants to go to 76ers.
That's my point. So you're dealing with a case where, because the Sixers cash strapped themselves badly, too. Embiid's contract's big. Now, he's great. He's worth it right now, but Ben Simmons' contract, Tobias Harris' contract, and even a lot of the veterans that they're still paying because of all the bad contracts they had in the past, they have to try to make that money thing work. Now, the Nets right now don't have the money problems as much. They have all the money invested into the three players because everyone else is on vets minimums pretty much. So they don't really have that issue. But the Sixers, if they're going to make that kind of thing work, might have to get another team involved too. So that's what is going to make it very tough for the Nets to try to be able to move hard in the way that they have doing it. And also, again, him wanting out too is going to lower his trade value too. So is the team going to say, all right, can we make this kind of thing work too? If James Harden isn't cooperating with the Nets, with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, is a contending team going to think, all right, maybe this is a guy we could trust, even though he's a superstar player?
And Anthony Davis is definitely going to be available for the Lakers.
I think so too.
I really do, especially the way the Lakers are playing, and teams like the Knicks that are looking for that other superstar. If they can't land De'Aaron Fox, maybe they trade Julius Randle over there to the Lakers and maybe another piece or two to the Lakers, and you swap for a guy like Anthony Davis and bring him to New York. He wanted to play in New York. You get him to play with R.J. Barrett and the players that they have, and then in the offseason, maybe either you draft a point guard or you maneuver somebody where you can bring another good point guard to play with this team. And then you have your three guys. You have your R.J. Barrett, you have your Anthony Davis, you have your point guard that can actually get this team over the hump, something that the Knicks have not done over the last couple of years. And I want to see the Knicks a playoff team every single year where they're competing and maybe eventually compete for a championship.
Yeah, I always was curious because Anthony Davis, his first trade was to the Lakers, so LeBron is still in control of the players he's going to want to bring, and he really hasn't had that kind of control yet in his career. Now Kevin Durant's starting to have that with the Warriors, then with the Nets, and Steph Curry obviously with the Warriors, bringing in Kevin Durant too. But Anthony Davis hasn't really had that kind of leverage yet, so you wonder wherever he ends up getting traded, what kind of effect that'll have in terms of him wanting to bring in the players that he wants to play with most too. And the Bulls were initially the team that he wanted to go to a couple of years ago, but now they spent a lot of money this offseason. And I don't know if they're going to mess with what's working for them as the number 2 seed in the East. So maybe now that does present an opportunity for a team like the Knicks, who have the money and have the big market incentive too, to finally make that kind of thing work. It's just a matter of, can they get it done, and can they get the players that Anthony Davis would want if that's the move they want to make.